My name is Tanya Thompson, and I work in the toy and game industry. I was born and lived for a very long time in Canada and have recently moved here to the U.S.
Very good. Now you do, as I understand, have a enviable history because everybody at this conference enjoys the intersection of math and puzzles, clearly. But you get to sort of live that more than the rest of us do. So let's sort of start at the beginning. You started out as a high school teacher?
That's right. That's right. So my dad was a math teacher, so it ran in the family. I always loved studying math. I went and got a math degree and then decided to follow in his footsteps and became a math teacher.
Okay. And what level was that?
High school.
High school.
So high school math. Yeah, and I used a lot of games and puzzles in my classroom. Like I was known where, at like private schools where I could put out things, I'd have like puzzles hanging from the ceilings and game bookshelves full of games and things like that.
Now, were you acquainted with Martin Gardner by reputation at this point already?
Oh, just from, yeah, like his literature.
Yeah, so I just was going to ask where you were getting your games and puzzles from.
Right, so at that point it was because I was a math teacher, I was looking in toy stores and places like that where the games or puzzles were spatial or had some sort of mathematics in them, that sort of thing.
I'm not a teacher at that level, but I imagine from reading their literature that you're encouraged to do this. There's a lot of encouragement for teachers to be using recreational materials. Is that true, or did you have to sort of buck a trend?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say necessarily that all the places that I've taught, you know, there were rooms like mine kind of thing, but certainly it was accepted. So I don't know if I was bucking a trend, but certainly, well, at the high school level, it was probably a lot of like lectures and things like that, whereas I was always like a big believer in hands-on activities, and especially puzzles, because they really like not jigsaw puzzles, but mechanical puzzles, the kind that you have to like put together in order to solve or twist like a Rubik's Cube. Mm-hmm. And I got a lot of joy and a lot of information about the way my students thought by watching them interact with these playthings.
Now, when I was in high school, I was in the math club, but we only did boring puzzles. Now, I understand that you were involved in math competitions as well, and I assume your puzzles were more interesting.
Well, what I did with, I was always trying to find ways to inspire my students in this subject called math that I loved. And it's a definite thing that there's a math phobia out there. So sometimes it was about getting kids to kind of get past that. And so the way I would do that would be to have them have fun in the classroom. So the University of Waterloo puts on a national math contest, and it's through these math problems sets. And I got to know some of the professors there, and they asked me to come write problems for this group, which was a huge honor. Only 70 teachers from across the country were invited to do this. So that's how I got involved in the University of Waterloo with this writing contest, this math contest.
Now, I understand then the next innovation you had was having math fairs.
Right.
Now, is this something at the high schools, at Waterloo, or outside of the schools?
So they're called SNAP math fairs, and they started by a couple of professors and a high school math teacher out of Alberta, out of Edmonton. And there was this well-known, Dr. Andy Liu, well-known professor who would like teach to kids of all ages. And a high school math teacher said, how can we get more of these puzzles that you do in math clubs and things like that into the classroom? And so they came up with SNAP math fairs, which are basically where you take like an old problem, let's say like a river crossing problem, like the goat, the wolf, and the cabbage, and you're a farmer and you have to get them all across, but you can only take one at a time in a boat. So taking these types of problems, and you would have your students like build a manipulative and in order to solve it. So instead of tracking things in your head, you'd actually like be able to play with it and manipulate it. And then one of the things I brought to the organization was I had my kids rewrite their problems not as a wolf, a goat, and a cabbage, but something they were interested in. And so the math fairs would have a theme like Wizard of Oz. So it wasn't a wolf, a goat, and a cabbage, but it was Dorothy and, et cetera, et cetera. So it was, that I learned when I was at the University of Waterloo, and I was looking because I wanted to do a math fair in the school I was at. And someone gave me an article from Math Magazine about these professors, Ted Lewis and Andy Liu had written this article in that magazine about SNAP math fairs. Now, I did it with students of all ages, so it was harder sometimes to get going at a high school level because they're so curriculum focused. So I was most successful in more of the elementary grades, that I would either go into a school and teach it, or at one point I was in a school that was K to 12, so I had that influence.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because you had a day job. Was this something the schools were encouraging you to do, or something you did on your own?
So this one school in particular, this private school, was super encouraging and just like, let's give the best experience to our students. And I, as like the lead of the math department, was always trying to like think of new ways. And actually, a good friend of mine was a science teacher, and so he was doing a science fair, Corey Lonis, and I was like, how can I rival, like he gets the kids going with science fair? So that's when I started hunting around for a math fair.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, at this time you met Bill Ritchie.
Yes.
How did that happen?
So, so Andy Liu is a member of the Gathering for Gardner, and he is the professor out of Edmonton at that time who was doing SNAP math fairs. He knew Bill Ritchie, and so actually he had just come back from a Gathering for Gardner, and that was before I was attending the gatherings. And he was like, Tanya, I can't come to your math fair. They had asked me to launch SNAP math fairs in Ontario, where I was living. And so I was doing a conference out of the University of Toronto for teachers to teach them how to do SNAP math fairs. So he said, I can't come to your first conference, but I just was talking to Bill Ritchie. He's the CEO of Think Fun, and he would love to come. And I was like ecstatic, because I use Think Fun puzzles in my classroom, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to meet the CEO of Think Fun. So I was like super jazzed that that connection was made. And so Bill indeed came to my conference that I had that year on SNAP math fairs.
Yeah, he's very generous at this time and with his puzzles, so he probably brought some things to share with the children.
Oh, he really did. Yeah, yeah.
But then you deserted your teaching career to work for him.
Yeah, so he came to the conference, we hit it off. He was like really interested in kind of like puzzles and education, and he was doing some things with Think Fun at the time. So it kind of started with, hey, Tanya, can you look at this manual, at this thing? And I kept it depends on who you talk to. So Bill reminded me today that he was like, yeah, because I'd probably say to him a lot, like, Bill, you should hire me, Bill, you should hire me. But eventually, maybe I convinced him, but because about a year later, he asked me if I would come work for Think Fun. So it was a big decision, because I loved teaching, but I was also super curious about this bigger world of toys and puzzle games to make you think. So, and Think Fun is an incredible company.
Well, I have great respect for the company because of their consistent high quality of their products.
Absolutely.
Can you say anything about how they came to do that? Did they reject lots of things? I mean, how did they know? Just good luck, good intuition? How did they know what was so good?
So Bill and Andrea, so Bill Ritchie and Andrea Barthelo, their husband and wife, they started the company in 1985. And from what Bill talks, the stories he tells, is it was really kind of just like luck at the beginning. They really believed in their first puzzle called the hexadecimal puzzle, and they thought they would bring it to the world. And Bill's dad had worked at Bell Labs, and so these kinds of like thinking objects were not new to him. So they decided to start a company, and it still goes strong today. So a testament to them.
But again, internally, did they have a staff that tested things, or did they just have good taste?
Yeah, I think so. when it first started, for sure, it was a lot about Bill's taste, because he's definitely the visionary and the puzzle guy. So it would have been a big influence of his in terms of what they did. So it was a lot dependent on Bill and what he thought was going to be good.
Well, the reason I'm bringing up taste is because after you worked for them a while, you started to scout out puzzles for him.
Yeah.
And so it sort of ties together, because finding puzzles is perhaps easy, but finding good puzzles is not very easy at all.
Yeah.
So tell me how you changed your role within Think Fun.
Yeah, because I started as director of education. So I was doing the stuff I mentioned to you, like with the stuff we were trying to do in the education market. Well, Bill basically approached me. I think there was probably a conversation that happened between himself and Andrea and other people. And he'd been doing the scouting, per se, for 25 years. And so he was like, I really want us to find new and innovative things, but I think it's time to kind of pass the reins to someone else to do it. And I was a big fan of puzzles and games in the company, and I also loved meeting the creators and the inventors behind them. And so I guess it was a natural fit, so they asked me if I would take that role over from him, so that's when I started Inventor Relations. Inventor
Relations, that's such a dry term for having fun seeking out wonderful.
Best job in the world. I know, it's true. I have the best job in the world. So,
can we assume that you don't have your name on any of these yourself, but you're the in-between? I don't want to take anything away from you. If there's some puzzles that your name is on, I'd like to know.
There are a couple where my name is on them because I was involved with the challenge development. So in a company the size of Think Fun, you don't only wear one hat. So I definitely did the scouting, or the Inventor Relations is called, where I traveled the world meeting inventors to find Think Fun's next big idea. And at the same time, I also was part of the product development team. And because I was the puzzle person, I was the one that was kind of leading the challenge development. So Think Fun does puzzles where there's a deck of challenges, like in their most famous game is Rush Hour, and you set up the grid like it says, shows on the card, and then you have to push the cars around to try and get the red car out of the traffic jam. So those challenges need to be developed. And so that was part of my role. So there were a couple of games, Gravity Maze and Laser Maze, where my name's actually on the box because I helped in challenge development.
Very good. Now, tell us about how you first met Martin Gardner.
Oh, so this goes back to Bill. I mentioned to him at one point, right at the beginning of our friendship, I said, gosh, I'd really love to meet Martin Gardner. And he was like, oh, I know Martin. I'd be happy to make an introduction. And I was like, oh my God, I'd love to meet Martin Gardner. So he did some pre-call to Martin and said, hey, there's this woman, she'd love to talk to you. Do you mind if she gives you a call? And he gave him his permission for me to call him. So I was like, Bill wrote me an email and said, Tanya, you're good to go. Here's Martin's number. He knows that you want to talk to him. So I called Martin nervously one day because I was like, he's such a big influence in my life. And so I called him, and we must have been on the phone for an hour. And he was so, he was so sharing of information. He'd be, have you read this book? Do you know this person? And he knew so much, and he was sharing it with me. And I was like, I was over the moon having the chance to talk with him. So at the end of the call, he said to me, or I said to him, I said, Martin, I just want to let you know how much this phone call meant to me, because this is a big opportunity for me to talk to you, and I've just really loved our conversation. And he said, oh, Tanya, he goes, well, I loved it too. Why don't you call me again tomorrow? And I was like, ah! And so I did, of course. And then after a couple calls, we just started this regular thing. And then eventually he said, well, if you're ever in Oklahoma, because that's where he was at the time. And I was like, I'm going to be in Oklahoma. So Bill and I made my first trek to Oklahoma to visit Martin. He was in an assisted living facility. And so my first visit was with Bill. And then I went every year thereafter. And Bill coined it my pilgrimage to Martin. So
indeed.
Yeah.
A lot of people made a pilgrimage to that center.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. And, well, there's lots of stories there, but we don't have time for that. Now, you
Yes.
left Binary Arts.
Yeah.
And you were in, I guess, retail? Is that the right term?
Yes.
At that point, were you inventor relations, or were you doing some other role at that point?
Yeah, at that point, I went to a company called Mastermind Toys, which is a huge, strong, amazing retail in Canada. So they have like 55 to 60 stores across Canada. And I was friends with the CEO. And anyway, what he was is like, come on board, and you have a nose for products, so let's figure out what we could do together. So I really my role there was like a buyer. So like an overseas buyer. So I would travel to like China and Hong Kong and Germany and places with John and look for a product, but not ideas, but actual finished product that he would then, and then I would be part of the team that would bring it back to Canada, get it shipped to Canada, and put it in the stores.
There must be a world of toy fairs that I'm not aware of.
Right, there are a lot of them.
I see.
Yeah. So yeah.
And now we find you in U.S. working for Hasbro.
Yeah, so, well, there's one hop between there, which was marbles. So at Mastermind, what I really learned was that I missed working with the creatives and the innovators and the inventors. So then Marbles, the Brain Store, was a U.S. retailer at that time, and they did an exclusive marbles line. So they hired me to basically go back to scouting, which is what I loved. And I wasn't very long there before Hasbro had an opening. And so now I work for Hasbro doing what I did for Think Fun. So it's called, I'm the Director of Global Product Acquisition for Gaming. And so I'm searching the world again for the next big board game for Hasbro.
Well, gaming is different than puzzles in my mind's eye. So is it a change of focus for you, or you view it as more of the same?
So Hasbro does do Rubik's Cube, so it does have some puzzles, but you're right, it's definitely more game and it's more mass market. So I guess to me this role, like, because I have very much of an analytical brain and I love puzzles, is like a puzzle itself. So I'm like trying to find out where the best places are, what the best ideas are to bring them in. So so the product is different, but the role is the same.
The role is the same. But you must encounter what I've heard about, which is the hungry game developer. They develop games and they want somebody to buy their game.
Oh, sure.
And I don't envy you having to deal with these people, because no matter how good their ideas are, they're desperate.
Right. Well, it's as long as they have a good idea, that's really all that matters. So yeah, there's different levels of desperation and professionalism and everything else. But I love creative people, so you kind of meet all kinds, and so that's okay. And it's really about what their idea is. So I don't care if the idea comes from the most professional person or the person who's never done anything in their past around a game. It's just like, what's the best idea?
But you don't have enough hours in the day to listen to
Well,
all
that
of
is
these
true.
people.
It's true, and so I'm harder to reach now working for a company like Hasbro.
Yeah.
And also Hasbro can be a life changer if you have the next Pie Face or the next Toilet Trouble or the other great games that we're doing right now. It can be a game changer for you,
Right.
because of the volume and that Hasbro has the ability to do. So yeah, but I see who I can, and I try and mix it with the people that I know will perform, and then also always leave room for some wild cards.
But in Barnes & Noble, for example, a major retailer,
Yeah.
they have a section in which it's only half games, but other half is puzzles.
Right.
So it seems like the puzzle market is still quite large.
Right. Yeah. It's there's definitely an appetite out there, especially right now with STEM or STEAM and studies of making sure you keep your brain sharp, that sort of thing. There's definitely an appetite.
But Hasbro, because of their history, is more focused on games.
So toys and games for
Yes.
sure,
Yeah.
but in terms of within the game space, puzzles or board games, or we don't do a lot of board games lately, but games themselves, then Yeah, there's a bigger appetite for us for games.
So are you learning anything new at this conference?
Oh gosh. Oh, at this conference, I love this conference so much. What I love is there's so many extremely passionate, bright people that are willing to share what they love. And so, yeah, like I'm always inspired by like Henry Segerman and his like amazing objects that he 3D prints, designs and 3D prints. I met Adam. What's Adam's last name? He does the art of play, which is amazing. And there was a blogger and then you know. I'm talking to and getting a selfie with Erno Rubik earlier this morning. That was a huge thrill. And then to see the panel of Stuart Kaufman, who's like an absolute icon in the puzzle world, sitting there with Bill Cutler, another amazing puzzle maker, and John Rausch and Nick Baxter. Like that, you don't get any better quality of content than right here.
Let's go back to education.
Yeah.
How much of your work at Hasbro do you think you can put back towards that market?
Yeah, it's a good question because we definitely there are definitely like teachers that might use, whether it's some classics like Twister or Clue or Battleship, you know, those kind of classic brands that are definitely appealing to teachers. I know I use them myself. So to me, my focus right now is a lot in just bringing joy to people, and that's what I think games do. And in this world of everybody being on screens and I have 3 teenagers now becoming young adults, where it's like I get it. Everybody's on they're doing their thing on their screens. So how do we bring the family back together face to face? And regardless of the game, whether it's Pie Face or whether it's something that takes 3 hours to play, I know my family, we kind of do the more lighter stuff because that's what we have time for. So I think that's what I focus on, is the fact that it brings families together, it brings people a lot of joy and laughter, and that's what I love.
Very good.
Yeah.
I think I should thank you at this point for having all these great answers for us. Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
Bye-bye.